We have a moral obligation to understand the ultimate reasons why we destroy one another.
Welcome. Stay with us until the end to find out the reason why we choose to go to war.
As a scholar of war studies and a clinical psychologist who has spent a career fathoming psychological suffering, I often ask myself, are there any greater human anguishes than those caused by war? For the sheer scope of grief and wasted human potential, we have a moral obligation to understand the ultimate reasons why we destroy one another. Fields as varied as economics, political science, religious studies have all tried to explain war. But still, how many of us have reflected on the cruelties of war or have lived them and simply shaken our heads in disbelief? Perhaps it is time for a new lens. I suggest the evolutionary sciences, fields that explain the evolved purpose, the why of a particular behavior, including warfare. At their core, those explanations are not about money or politics or religion. They are about us as creatures of biology, programmed by natural selection to compete for survival and reproduction. To benefit from the wisdom of these sciences, we must first avoid what is known as the naturalistic fallacy, the mistaken idea that just because we may have an instinct for something, that instinct is necessarily moral, desirable, or inevitable. Often our instincts are none of those things, and in many cases we have the power to choose, but much, much more so when we understand and when we take an unflinching look in the mirror at who we are. Now, in our world, the single biggest predictor of violence is a simple demographic, and that demographic is men. Now, this doesn't mean that all men are violent, but the vast majority of every conceivable kind of violence, from spousal abuse to gang fights to world wars, is committed by men. Now, it is true that men will go to war for honor, for patriotism, to protect their homelands or their brothers in arms. But there is another ancient and powerful reward for war that lingers, mostly subconsciously, in the evolved minds of men, and that is, brace yourselves, sex. To see how this can be, first some basic facts about our reproductive psychology. A highly robust international finding is that men and women engage in different reproductive strategies. Across every culture on earth, men on average tend to prefer more sexual partners as compared to women. Women invest more in their offspring, so women tend to be far choosier. Now, this says nothing as to whether men or women should have these preferences or can want something different. They can. But just like other male animals, men's reproductive fitness is directly related to a number of copulations. Theoretically, a man can reproduce with every sexual encounter, and this is not a biological reality for women. There is a problem with all of this male demand. Men produce sperm by the millions and well into old age. By comparison, women's reproductive resources are scarce, limited to 500 total ova across the lifespan, to the period between adolescence and menopause, by things like pregnancy and polygyny, where powerful men hoard women, creating shortages in the mating pool. To use the idiom of economics, in the natural world, where demand is high and supply is low, we have instinctual competition, and often that competition is violent. Now, it's often hard to see our instincts because typically the older the instinct, the more hidden it is from our everyday conscious awareness. One way to overcome this instinct blindness is to first observe the instinct expressed in another animal. Most male mammals, countless monkey species, and all of the great apes engage in violent competition over females. Male baboons attack each other with dagger-like canines to win groups of females. Male gorillas also square off to fight for sexual supremacy. But for a look at male mate competition occurring at the group level, we turn to our closest relatives. Robust chimpanzees will form all-male war parties, silently patrol the edges of their territory. If they encounter a smaller party from the rival troop, they tear them to pieces. Enough successful patrols, and all males from the rival group are killed, its territory, its food, and most critically, its females are absorbed, increasing male reproductive opportunity. Male chimpanzees have a reproductive incentive for making war. But do men have a reproductive incentive for war? Could it really be about sex? Or did this nearly universal male behavior somehow bypass men? To begin, the Guinness Book World Record holder for a number of offspring goes to a Moroccan sultan who was called Ismail the Bloodthirsty. In the 1700s, Ismail sired 888 children and kept more than 500 concubines. How did Ismail achieve this record? By raiding his neighbors, slaughtering thousands upon thousands of men, and capturing their women. Archaeological evidence suggests this behavior is very ancient. Prehistoric massacre sites have been found where among all the bashed up skulls and bones, there was a noted absence of specifically reproductive age females, suggesting these Stone Age women were not killed, but taken captive. We see this impulse arising unconsciously in the modern day, in societies where polygyny is allowed, where again, the percentage of available females is constrained, we see more revolutions. When there are women's shortages, young men instinctively start making war against the male dominance hierarchy. Even more directly, in hunter-gatherer societies, tribesmen will raid their neighbors, skewer all the men with arrows, and take the women as their wives. And on a much broader scale, that terrible practice of wartime rape is staggeringly common. For example, during the Bosnian genocide, there were an estimated 50,000 rapes. The Rwandan genocide, 250,000. And in World War II, when the Red Army invaded Berlin, they raped 2 million German women. Now, this doesn't mean that all men join the military with the intent to rape, to pillage, and to plunder. I can tell you, they do not. But the ease with which many men will rape in wartime is telling, as are the very harsh punishments that militaries must employ to prevent it. So taking a step back, in wartime, we have male primates killing their male rivals and reaping the sexual rewards. A chilling pattern that we know from our closest primate relatives. Now, this isn't always conscious. Sometimes it is. ISIS and Boko Haram are two current-day examples of men going to war with the explicit intention of killing their rivals and taking their women as the spoils of war. And they are also an example of male mate competition driving even so-called holy wars. Consider that every one of the 9/11 hijackers believed that by killing himself in jihad, his dominant male God would grant him 72 virgins in the afterlife. This impulse is old, and it's not restricted to any particular religion. According to the Bible, in battle, God commands Moses to order his men to go to the rival tribe, kill all the men, kill all the boys, kill all the women who have slept with a man, and save for yourself every girl who has never slept with a man. So, what do we do with all this knowledge? How do we manage the most basic and primal reproductive impulses driving men to kill? For all that they have to tell us about why we do what we do, we must ensure that the evolutionary sciences have a protected voice at the policy table. Throughout our history, men have dominated positions of political power. It should come as no surprise that men's reproductive imperatives get expressed in the political realm, in the ways that we handle conflicts with other nations. Now, there is no question at all that militaries provide something invaluable: protection. But there is another ancient and powerful reward for war that lingers subconsciously in the minds of men. When women express their reproductive imperatives in the political realm, they get expressed differently than men's. Because evolutionarily, women would hardly have benefited from tearing into the rival village, killing all the women, and having sex with as many men as possible. Accordingly, when the ratio of women in government increases, nations are less likely to use military force to solve conflicts with other nations. Military spending goes down, and we see greater political stability. Across our species' history, women's biggest evolutionary challenge has been rearing incredibly vulnerable human offspring. Accordingly, when more women govern, we see greater access to things like health care and education, which benefits not only children, but everybody. So if stability is the goal, then all of this makes a very strong case for not only carefully considering how our reproductive psychology gets expressed unconsciously in the political realm, but also for clearing the way for more women into positions of governance for the survival instincts that they bring. But before we can even begin, we must be truthful about what we are. We are organic beings with finite lifespans and instincts that we inherited from our primate ancestors. To many, these facts can be unsettling. Even in the United States, still today, the very topic of evolution by natural selection is incredibly controversial, greatly for what it may say about us as mortal beings, not above, but related to all other life on this earth, and consigned to the same fates. But as history shows us over and over and over again, the consequences of not understanding are far worse than the discomfort of knowing. We must also see that while we are sometimes prone to do terrible things to one another, we are also capable of great compassion and great unity, unlike any other species. Natural selection provided us with these capabilities as well. Lastly, if there's anything that we can say about us humans, is that our greatest adaptation is in fact transcending our biology. Every piece of technology that you can imagine, from the simplest household items to entire fields such as medicine or computing or engineering, are all evidence of this. Transcending our impulses for war is also within our reach. But for this, we must bring our instincts into the light of scrutiny with great courage and great honesty. Only then will we be able to decide which of them continues to serve us and which of them should be left behind on the savannas of our ancestors. Thank you.
Thank you for staying until the end. If you liked it, don't forget to subscribe, a like and a share are extremely appreciated. I wish you a wonderful day.